Welcome back to my channel, you guys.
Welcome to the club.
Thank you so much for clicking on my video. If you're new to my channel, thank you so much for clicking. So today's discussion is going to be about the secret genocide that was funded by the United States.
FBI!
Yeah, this one was a really interesting one, just because I also seen this a while back, and I just love how my memory just reminds me of like certain documentaries to watch. So before I go in, like, I did like kind of want to give a shout out before I did this video to my boy Davey. Davey used to go to Skyline with me. We used to be on the football team. He did track. He was a hell of a player. But the reason why I bring him up is because I remember that he probably doesn't even remember, but I swear I remember this so clearly. Like when me and him started getting close, because we was playing sports and whatnot, and I know I like to dive into people's history and start asking them questions about their family and stuff. And I think at the time his mom was still in Guatemala, and that's what this whole like podcast today is going to be about. It's going to be about like the secret genocide that that was hidden from us, that occurred in Guatemala. I don't know if you guys knew, but it was like I think 200,000 Guatemalans killed. So some of you guys who are unaware of this, you guys may be asking like, what happened? You know how our history can be. Our history can be very unfortunate. Oh, so the reason why I bring up like Davey is because, like I said, I remember we had this conversation one day, and I was like asking him, like, like, what's your goal? Like, what was your dream and whatnot? He was like, I swear, I don't know if he remembers, but he was like, just to graduate and have my mom here watch me. And I was like his freshman year. And then, yeah. And like, before I even fast forward to senior year, I just seen him like develop himself, like everything he did was for his mother and for his sister, I think too. Like, he was really close with his mom and his sis. Yeah, I just found like his story very inspiring. And I remember senior year when graduation came, his mom was there, and I remember just seeing him staring at his mom the whole entire time. I am not lying. Like, I'm pretty sure like that day kind of changed. It just changed everything about me. It kind of reminded me like to have a goal, like at that time I didn't know what goals were.
You're an idiot.
But yeah, Davey, if you're watching this one's for you, and I hope you're doing good, brother. All right, moving on. So they said in this documentary that it was a genocide by Americans, right? So let's time travel to Guatemala, September 1999. So it was a place called Chintenango, I think, if that's how you pronounce it. It was like a popular tourist destination in the northwest highlands of Guatemala. So these locals were like mostly Mayan Indians who lived in these parts since long before like when the Spaniards came. Yeah, when the Spaniards came, it was pretty bad. Of course, like during that time was a lot of colonization going on. And like pretty much in Guatemala during that time, the women were still wearing their traditional clothes and their headdresses. And I find Guatemala beautiful because, yeah, like the style that they wear and the colors and everything, it's so beautiful. And the things that they create, like, just, yeah, they create things out of just scratch, and it's amazing. So the people were like so poor that even their exotic handcraft that they had to create, like, they had to sell it for cheap, even though the quality was so good. But it was really rough. So yeah, like a lot of people are poor. And I was like, although you could occasionally see armed soldiers around that time, their nation was more peaceful, like after like 36 years of guerrilla warfare. And I mean guerrilla warfare. I remember, I think when I was a kid, I don't know how old I was, but I was like, saw some videos of like when the massacres were going on in Guatemala, like literally just boys and men just running in the streets, just running for their lives. Literally, if you're a man, you're gonna get gunned down. Even if you're a woman or child, like, it was crazy. But I didn't understand what was going on. At that age, I was just seeing stuff. But as I got older, the pattern is crazy. So however, in 1982, the province of Quiche, I think that's how you pronounce it, did not receive any tourists. Rather, death was the main arrival for Guatemala City. So yeah, there was a time when there was a lot of tourists, but there was also a time when no one came because it was literally a gravesite. So the strongest army in the area is supporting the wealthy ruling class, which was like slaughtering and chopping up these native Indians. So that's what was said in this documentary, that like, you know, the army was being paid to support the ruling class, and you know how that goes. You gotta destroy the people underneath you. It's really interesting. That's just my opinion. So I also put as if the army saw these native Indians as animals, because literally that's how they were described. They were literally describing like them just chopping up the natives. They were just killing them, slaughtering them left to right with no mercy. Also, like, the Reagan administration at the time wrote off such discussions as a ludicrous exaggeration. So not only were Guatemalans being slaughtered, but the Reagan administration, you know, United States had a lot of things, you know, whenever there was like stuff like this going on, you know, America was always involved in some way or matter. So it was really sad that the administration was basically saying that this wasn't true and people weren't being slaughtered and whatnot. But as time goes by, truth always makes it to the surface. So my next bullet point was, but there was an American who knew the genocide, like who can tell us everything about what happened. So in the documentary, he flew in from Oklahoma City to talk to the person who like made this whole documentary, right? So I put, he was not a tourist or a businessman. He was an old retired spy. Bone expert Dr. Clyde Snow of forensic anthropology was only 2.5 hours away from the boneyards in Guatemala City. So when he made it like to the airport to meet up with the guy who was like doing this whole documentary, they were only 2.5 hours away from the aftermath or like the grave site. So I was like, uh-oh, it's getting serious. So while they were like at the airport, they were just talking about how Guatemala was a mass grave. And he said that you can literally throw a rock and wherever it lands, under the surface are graves of Mayans and ancient Indians and those who were executed with no mercy. Like, so let's see. So I said he makes the compelling argument that these individuals who were being dug up literally pose no threat. Because like when they were slaughtering these Guatemalans, the people who were slaughtering them saying that these people were dangerous and they were crazy and they were a threat and whatnot, you know. So in late 1981, the army initially entered the province of Quiché. It was committed to destroying the final stronghold of the 3,000 guerrilla fighters who had been opposing it for control of Guatemala since the early 1960s. So as you can see, and whenever there's like a fight or war going on, there's supposedly always like these insurgents or these freedom fighters fighting, like, you know, the tougher guys and whatnot. But the people who suffer are always the innocent people. Like if we can see what's going on right now with Palestine and Israel, like it's Israel and versus Hamas, but literally what you're seeing is innocent Palestinians being killed. So I just find it interesting, the patterns of history. It's really mind-boggling. So I said soon, horrifying rumors of massacred civilians, women being raped and tortured, and villages being set on fire started to spread, like from the hidden hills of Quiché, I believe. So imagine you're, you know, living at that time in a home with your family, and you hear rumors that your friends and family are being killed and slaughtered by the hundreds, raped, you know, literally just because you're Guatemalan, I guess. That I just didn't understand why they were being slaughtered. At the end, I told myself, it's like because they're ancient people. You know, when you belong to an ancient bloodline, my opinion, you're a threat. Because, I don't know, you hold on to a beautiful culture maybe. You hold on to like something that, I don't know, like why we are such a threat. So, moving on to my next bullet point. So according to the church, the army's operations have caused a terrible human tragedy. So the Amnesty International released first-hand reports of numerous mass killings. Yet the United States government did its best to shift this blame from the army to the left-wing guerrillas. Again, we can see what's going on today with the, you know, Palestine and Israel. They're literally blaming Hamas. So they're killing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Palestinians. but they're just shifting the blame to Hamas. So they're gonna cut off electricity, and they're gonna cut off food, and they're gonna cut off everything, but they're gonna blame Hamas. So I just find history, there's always a connection. There's always a connection. So moving on. The United States Department of State Human Rights in Guatemala in 1983 states, it's been established that some of the alleged atrocities never occurred. In most cases known to have occurred, it has not been possible to clearly determine whether the guerrillas or the army was responsible. It appears more likely that the insurgents have been guilty. So I like the word insurgents, because I'm a communication major, mass communications, and like we're like literally I took classes about literally wordings, like the way we word things and how that can shift the whole perspective.
It's about the big picture.
Like with this whole Palestine and Israel thing, that's what they're using. They're using the word insurgents and barbaric animals and whatnot. So same thing with what happened in Guatemala. Like they claim them as insurgents. So I found this really interesting because like I saw a video yesterday that someone posted about Cat Williams. It was an episode where he talks about how America uses different words to like, I guess, brainwash the mass to thinking that it's okay to murder people.
Well, he was talking about how that word insurgent is used to kind of depict and bamboozle people.
They pimps. They got us over there thinking we ain't really killing real people over there. They don't never act like it's real people. They don't never say today we killed 6 men and 4 women and 3 children. They use a word can't readily identify. Insurgents. Today we killed a group of insurgents. And brothers be at home like, I don't even know no insurgents. You kill all them. I don't have not one insurgent friend.
Supposedly, like I said, it's my opinion, but it was a really good argument. So like using the word insurgents makes it okay. And yeah, like that video of Cat Williams literally hit it on the nail. Let's see. So as the doctor I explained to you earlier, you know, the guy who came from Oklahoma City. So they made it to Guatemala City, right? And they're literally like traveling up the hills to get to where the gravesite was, which was located on a cornfield. They were already, as they got there was already 5 open graves, and like people were crying, and it was really sad to see that. Like, yeah. So it was a mixed grave because there was literally 14 skeletons in all, but nearly all of them were like, you know, it was mixed. There was like men, women, children. So it wasn't just one group. It was, you know, multiple groups, you know, ranging from adults, women, men, children. So basically it showed that literally everyone was being massacred. So somewhere in the cornfield was another 50 bodies, they said, give or take. And the fact that some of the men who buried the mothers, sisters, brothers, and other family members are literally there unearthing them again. So it basically gives like us the absolute proof that this happened, because the people who literally buried their family members will literally came back 17 years later to undig them up to show us. It's quite like, you know. So there was a man named Baltazar who'd been digging up trenches for 2 days trying to find the grave where he buried his sister. So like imagine just running away from genocide and you're literally carrying your loved ones dead and you're just trying to find a place to bury them so you can come back later maybe and just like, you know, give them their due respect and whatnot. Interesting. So that was on March 2, 1982, and now 17 years later he is here again, like looking through the skeletons and showing people where, you know, he dug his family members, and you can see like the broken skulls and the bones are like being washed because it was like, you know, it was being unearthed for a while. So it's pretty interesting how scientifically, like when they go in there, there's a whole process and they can just look at the skeleton and know exactly when they died, how they died. So they said each body will be photographed, each bone is bagged and labeled to be taken back to the lab in Guatemala City to basically investigate. And I was like, but even before the skeletons were removed, the team and his crew could tell much of a story, because they were looking at the skeletons, and like before they were moving the skeletons, they're like, hold on, they're just observing, and from that observation they were able to tell a lot, right? So let's see, like one of the graves was a husband and wife and sister all buried in the same grave, and there was a lady that was literally there, and that was the daughter. She was the daughter of the husband and wife, and she was just watching them being unearthed. So just imagine how that would feel. So one of the graves, or one of the skeletons had 3 gunshots to the head, like, which basically corresponded with the testimonies that was given by the Guatemalan people, that these victims were either shot or macheted. So they said that they both had skeletons that had the gunshot to the head, to the skull, and also machete wounds in the neck. So yeah, it was literally aligning. And the doctor also said that these executions were very close up and very methodical. And later, when the bones were moved, they found bullets from Israeli assault rifles used by the Guatemalan army. And I'm not making this up. I'm probably going to throw the clip in there just to show you guys I'm not kidding.
Later, when the bones are moved, they'll find bullets from Israeli assault rifles.
Let me repeat that. Later, when the bones were moved, they found bullets. From who? From Israeli assault rifles used by the Guatemalan army. I don't want to go too much into this loophole, but there's a lot of countries that have been... I don't want to say this statement, like, it might seem very controversial, but yeah, Israeli bullets have been scattered all around the world, if you know what I mean. But yeah, like I said, it's very controversial. It's just my opinion. So let's move on to what matters, to be honest. So there was no surprise to Andres, Miguel, and Salvador. They remembered all too clearly when the army arrived. So on Sunday, the 28th of February in 1982, this is what one of them had to say. I said to my wife, we must get out, because we could see that the soldiers didn't see us as human beings, but as animals. When one saw some people walking away, he just shot and killed them. But my wife, who was expecting in 2 weeks, didn't want to go. So she said I should go alone because the soldiers were after men. She said, I am a woman. They won't do anything to me. It's better you go. So then I left my wife and my family in the house, and I went up into those hills. Imagine how sad that is just to go through that. Today, only the ruins of the church and abandoned schoolhouse shows where the village once stood. And from the hill, before the village, he watched the army go from house to house. So he was up in the hills, literally just watching the army go from house to house, praying that they won't do anything to his family. So they ended up rounding up everyone that they could find, even his wife and children, and took them up to the path of the cornfield out of sight. I believe the same cornfield that I was describing earlier. Okay, so now we're moving on to Miguel. I think the first person who I was talking about was Andres. So now it's going to be Miguel's story. Okay, so now it's Miguel's story. So, like, hiding in the hills was Miguel and his 3 children, and some of you guys may ask, like, what happened to his wife? So Miguel pretty much said that, like, his wife went to a market, I think earlier that morning or that day, and he never saw her again. So Miguel says, at about 2 or 3 in the afternoon, we heard a big noise over there. It was the poor people being killed, who were screaming. We heard shooting and screaming, but I didn't see anything because I was on the other side of the hill. So I stayed there with my 3 kids. No mother, with nothing. So poor guy, like him with his 3 children, all he hears is screaming and shooting, and his kids with no mother. Like, imagine just that experience, you know. It was 2 days before Andres and the other survivors emerged from the hills to bury the dead. And Andres covered his family with a blue plastic sheet before filling in their grave. So it preserved their shoes and clothes as well as their bones. So his wife and his 2 children, aged 4 and 5, and his father-in-law basically all died. 4 victims of one unremarkable disaster, to be honest. Like, so moving on. The Guatemalan Truth Commission collected detailed accounts more than 400 separate massacres in the Western Highlands in those years. There were about 100,000 individual victims. So 95% of those deaths, the commission said, were influenced by the Guatemalan army and the vigilante groups it had armed and controlled. Again, pointing the fingers, right? Like, you supply these groups, you give them everything they need, and you just point the blame on them, right? A scapegoat. Alright, let's see. So moving on, there was like this, I think there was like a ceremony going on, and there's a guy named Dr. Christian Thomas Chat, who was a chairman of the Forensic Anthropology Foundation. So basically he states, we concluded that in the counterinsurgency launched between 1981 and 1983 in certain parts of this country, agents of the government of Guatemala committed acts of genocide against the Mayan people. So the government of Guatemala. But there was other strings attached. So the use of the word genocide drew wild applause, right? From like the victims and stuff. And yeah, like everybody was happy that they actually used the word like genocide. But the interesting thing was they weren't really saying the names of who were really responsible. They weren't saying the names of the generals and, you know, the corporals who were like literally leading, you know, people into the houses and killing people. So there was a Guatemalan government agreement to the setting up of a truth commission, but in condition it did not attempt to name the perpetrators of the crimes that it described. So yeah, all the atrocities described, they said, as long as you guys don't say the names of who committed these atrocities, we good.
Can't hide from God's eye.
Interesting. So the Catholic Church was not so squeamish. So like the Pope named generals, he named the captains, literally by names, right? And guess what happened? But before I tell you what happened, the pastor said, unless we know the truth, the wounds of the past will stay open and cannot be healed. So yeah, 3 days later, the bishop was killed in his garage with a concrete block. Yes, a concrete block. And basically the priest who shared his house was also arrested, but he was let go. Thank God he wasn't killed. And yeah, there was no justice. Like the Pope, the only person who had strength in his heart to like somewhat bring, just to help people cope, you know? Imagine you're part of the Guatemalan people and you're walking on grave sites of your people who hasn't received justice. 200,000 Guatemalans were massacred, and of those victims identified in the United Nations sponsored Historical Clarification Commission, they said 83% were indigenous, Mayan, and 93% of these human rights violations were carried out by government forces. So, wow, that's really interesting. So 83% of people who were killed were indigenous Mayans, and 93% of these human rights violations were carried out by government forces, governments in whom we should trust, and who we basically supply them with our money and everything. So at the end of the day, it's just really interesting how the patterns, they always come back to, like, it's just interesting how patterns are always there, and like we think that every like calamity happening in every part of the world is different from one another. But I feel like every calamity that has happened within our history, I feel like are being influenced by the same powers. So yeah, like I said, this is my opinion. Do not take my opinion as face value. I'm here just to give information, but most importantly, I'm here to give justice. Because like when I first opened up my, you know, my whole YouTube thing, I said like, I want to be the voice for the voiceless and eyes for the unseen. And I even mean those who are not here anymore. So that's why like my whole podcast is like dedicated to those who have been lost, yet have not been forgotten. Because I know there's a lot of us who carry those in our hearts. There's a lot of people who are dying, and like we're the ones who give their name life. So basically at the end of the day, remember where you come from, and thank those who came before you, because those who came before you, you know, kind of set us up, you know, set us up for what we have today. Like back then used to be very crazy, but you know, our ancestors fought for a better life for every single one of us, so we all can pursue what we're supposed to pursue and do what we're supposed to do. But I feel like when we fail is when we don't do anything and we stay silent. So overall, I just feel like Guatemala, like doing this whole documentary or seeing this whole documentary just made me realize that we all belong to a beautiful tree. But I just don't understand why this tree is hated so much. Like, what about this tree makes us a threat? You know? Like, as you can see, the people who are being killed and colonized all around the world are just really good, in my opinion, just really good people. People who are just worshiping God and looking after their children, and you know, I just want all this war to stop, because today, every day I wake up, I'm always seeing what's going on in Palestine and Israel, and like I'm just seeing more and more and more killing and more killing and more killing. So like I said, what goes around comes around, and if we keep allowing this to happen, I don't know, I just feel like it will literally bring to surface things that we do not want to bring to surface. But like I said, I'm a person who really believes that if you pray and you stop allowing media to influence you, because a lot of times, like right now, we can see there's a war right now with the media. Like there's so much left and right fighting back and forth. Yeah, media is very dangerous, and I feel like what's bringing this war into fruition is media. So I feel like maybe we should just step back from media and literally just come face to face to one another, instead of seeing each other through a screen or by terms such as insurgents and animals and stuff. Like at the end of the day, we're all people. We all breathe, we all bleed, we all sleep, we all want a good life, yet we're stripping life from other people. So overall, again, I just hope war stops, because like they said, they think this is only the beginning, because many nations are jumping in right now. So like I said, let's pray for the best, and I really hope, you know, I hope this doesn't bother you guys too, because like, yeah, this is causing a lot of fear right now with people. Some people are probably, it doesn't bother them. Some people are like, I'm not afraid. But there are a lot of people right now who are afraid of what this will bring, you know, what this will cause. So at the end of the day, just don't be afraid. Just have strength and courage. We need courage to stand up against what is wrong. We need courage to like become our best selves. We need courage to become the best, you know, husbands, brothers, sisters, uncles, aunts. It takes courage to do a lot of things. Yeah, courage is something that, you know, and courage comes in many shapes and forms as well. So just, it's your interpretation of whatever that means to you. But just stop, maybe all stop living in fear, and maybe all stand up against what is wrong and start representing what is right. So thank you guys so much for being here and watching this video all the way through. And I really pray for, you know, the Guatemalan people. And I just hope war just stops in general. I just hope war stops. So overall, thank you guys so much again. I'm really grateful for you guys. So thank you for everything. And, you know, let's pray for a better future. Always pray for a better future. Farewell.